Sure. So if everyone's with me, we'll get going. Yeah, welcome to what we have called the Western Warriors Water Polo in 1 hour. Now, as you would have seen in the outline, the intro, we kind of moved through what is water polo and why it's so great, or why it's such a great sport. What are some of the major rules? What do people struggle with when they're watching the game? Then we move into the positions. What are the positions and what are they trying to do during the game? And also what makes a good player in each position. I think that's really crucial. Thirdly, we move on to strategy and what the coaches and the teams are trying to execute during the game. And then lastly, and probably most importantly, what can we do to make our players better? There's 5 major areas that we're looking at. And that's really where the Warriors Academy and all the training and what you do at schools and club and provincial level are trying to achieve. We're trying to make you better players. We're trying to make your kids better players. Okay, moving in the wrong direction. Sorry, guys. Okay, so why is water polo so great compared to other sports? I think if you're here at this point, you probably know the answers. It's a great team sport. It's really fun. It's short. It's pretty high impact sport. But at the same time, it's really good for developing overall fitness, developing team sport abilities, skill, and also it's really relatively injury-free. Now, you would have seen if you're following water polo or any swimming sport, there's a lot of talk about injury and overuse. Now, firstly, I highly doubt that our, sorry, let me just admit 1 or 2 more people. I highly doubt that our level of training is going to induce too many overuse injuries. And at the same time, we are working, and I know that Warriors are working and the schools are working, as well as Western Province, towards having a better warm-up process and prehab process to get people ready for the game. You just have to go down to any of the pools on a Saturday afternoon and see the ladies in their late 20s and 30s, and the men are playing right up until, the 70s and 80s. So it really is a game that you can continue for the rest of your lives, and watch your kids play for as long as you're around, really. So beautiful sport and really nice to develop a whole different set of skills. So we're talking about the vertical and horizontal positions in the game. Really, once a player is horizontal, which means they've moved out of a carrying or defensive position and they are swimming, the defensive player needs to take their hands off the attacking player and let them move. That's one of the most important aspects to our strategy that we'll talk about when we talk about driving and breaking drops, as well as driving through a tight mark. At this point, are there any questions about the rules that we've currently covered? Because we're about to move into major fouls. Okay, we're going to move on. Okay, into major fouls. As I mentioned in the intro video, this is where everything really gets a bit intense and players are told to leave the field. A major foul is anything that will exclude the player, get them excluded essentially out into the exclusion box, where they have to swim to their bench and wait out a 20-second penalty. That obviously gives the attacking team a man-up situation, which is basically an advantage in that there is an extra offensive player in the pool and they can move the ball around more freely with the aim to score. Now, there are a few ways to get yourself kicked out in the game. Firstly, any time that there is 2-hand contact, and we're going to see more and more of this as the game is moving towards a lighter, faster game. Anytime there is 2-hand contact on another player, that player is going to be excluded. So that includes impeding someone from swimming by pushing on their shoulders or pulling on them at any point on an arm or a leg, and dunking on the shoulders too if they're in a vertical position. So what we see in normal fouls is a player that's carrying the ball, an offensive player will move into a situation where the defender is in between him or her and the goal, and the defensive player will put one hand on their shoulder and reach over to play the ball. Now, often, especially again in junior polo, defenders being a little bit too keen to get to the ball, they might put two hands directly on the offensive player's shoulders, and they will push that player down and without moving towards the ball. And that would immediately be an offensive exclusion. Other ones would be intentionally grounding the ball, as you see in, or putting the ball under, as you see in this situation here. If this player is a defender, they've got the ball, they're taking it out of the offensive player's reach, that would be a defensive exclusion. Anything, as you might imagine, that involves kicking, punching, pushing, or overly aggressive play will also land up in an exclusion foul. One that you might see quite a lot, again, as the players don't have as much control over on the defensive side of things, is a head foul. So anytime that you see a referee tapping his head and then sending the player to the corner, it means that the defensive player has made contact with the offensive player's head, and for obvious reasons, that is dangerous, so that player is kicked out. Are there any questions around major fouls? Because that's where most people really struggle to pick up the nuances of the game, and then get really upset when one of their players is kicked out or when another player is not kicked out. Okay, excellent. Then we'll move on. Right, that brings me to one of the main points of today. I mean, even if it's a small section, it's a massive takeaway, hopefully for you to take into the game going forward. And this is for parents almost twice as much as for players. Refereeing is an extremely difficult job in any sport. And in water polo, where 99% of the action actually happens underwater, it's even more difficult. We've got a couple of referees in the crowd here, and I'm sure that they will agree with me that it's not an easy game. Again, there are 6 pairs of players and 2 goalkeepers in the pool, and there are only 2 referees monitoring the game. There is a lot of pushing, shoving, pulling, and jostling for position that might not be directly seen by the referee. And then again, players, parents, and coaches watching a particular set of players might pick up more than the referee. Now, that's just a coverall. I find it very difficult to imagine that anyone would actually try and influence the game from this position. It's just difficult to keep up with the action, let alone trying to influence who's going to win white caps or blue caps. What we see in school games especially is that young referees, so school-age referees, are refereeing their friends or grades below them. And again, just giving them leeway, and this counts, I suppose, right up until nationals or senior into provincial setup. Just giving the referee the benefit of the doubt is always the better way to go, even if you're losing time and time again. It's probably not their fault. Right, so moving into positions, this is something that is incredibly important for parents to understand. That firstly, your child is going to play all the positions in the team, and I absolutely encourage that too. That they play goalkeeper, center forward, center back, half, and wing as much as possible, and see themselves as dynamic players that can do it all. It really, really is in their best interest to experience the game from each one of these positions. I say this specifically because if you are at the Warriors already, or you're looking at the Warriors, you're probably wanting to improve your game rapidly. Often, especially because of our background in rugby or cricket, where there are pretty specific positions really early on, governed by body type or temperament, that becomes a bit of a hindrance in water polo if players see themselves as a left wing, or only as a center forward, or only a center back. Mostly because when they are asked to do something different within their team, whether it's by a coach or by another player, or by just the nature of the game putting them in that position, they're not comfortable. When they actually have all the physical tools to play all the positions anyway, they really just need the psychological confidence to say that they can play center forward or center back or half or wing, or even goalkeeper when called upon. So to look into the different positions, sorry, let me quickly go back. This is what we call the D formation. You'll see this in strategy coming up soon. We call it the D, obviously. It looks like a sideways capital D. And this is an attacking formation that we've set out here, looking at the goal that they're attacking. Now, the defense will set up goal side of this offensive formation. So they will put themselves on a line between the offensive player and their goal, and that's the best way to prevent the attacking player getting a better position. So what we see from these different positions is, yes, there are certainly instances in which you want certain players playing different positions because of their skill set, but quite quickly in the game, a right half can quickly become a left wing, or center forward can become a wing, a center back can become a half. It's really fluid, and you will see that right the way through the game as you progress. So wings and halves, their job really is to fetch the ball, carry the ball up the pool, make themselves available for passes from goalkeepers, make themselves available from passes from their fellow outfield players, and then to get shots off or get good passes into center forward. Now, again, just going back, these are the guys we're talking about here, left wing and left half, right wing and right half. They're either looking to attack the goal themselves or make a good pass into the center forward. And again, water polo only has so many patterns that plays out, and really the job of these guys is to fetch the ball from the goalkeeper, move it up effectively, not lose possession rather, and then play it forward into an advantageous position. So these players are generally quick, agile, they're good swimmers, they need to be able to pass and shoot accurately, and they need to be able to hold their water on defense so that opposition players aren't able to get past them easily. Their physical attributes generally are quick. They must have good legs. They need to be able to jump out the water to receive a pass. And then psychologically, they're generally the players who are looking to advance the game 1 or 2 steps ahead of where the game might be at the time. So they're looking to play into space. They're looking to set other players up, and they're looking to take opportunities where they come. Now, to move forward, we're going to look at the center back. And again, if I can just quickly go back to our diagram here, the center back in this case is in an offensive position. They need to be able to shoot from this position. They're generally going to be the furthest away from the goal. Having a powerful shot often comes along with being long and strong, as you want your center backs to be. And they also need to be able to manage the offense and manage the defense. When they're on offense in this position, they're attacking this goal. They're the only player that can really see every other player in the pool. And they also need to be able to marshal those players and communicate effectively to those players to get them into a good position. Now, on defense, if we were to quickly flip this around, the center back would be sitting behind or in front the center forward. And again, they can see the rest of the game, and they need to have good communication, and they need to be strong players that can hold this water in front or behind of the center forward as required. So generally, physically, your center backs are long and strong. They're tall players. They're technically minded because it's a very technical position. As you see this player here, he's wrestling. He's using pretty much every trick in the book. His lower hand or his left hand is pushing against the lower back of the offensive player. His right hand is completely illegally grabbing the cap strings of the offensive player. But these players aren't just raw energy. They aren't just raw power. They're calm, controlled, and they're able to play with their heads and with technique as much as just raw physical talent. All right, moving on. Okay, that's interesting. Moving to the center forward position. This is, if anything, the polar opposite of a center back. They are generally, not always, but generally a bit of a rounder, more powerful build, a more explosive build. They need to be very skillful with their hands, whereas center backs don't necessarily need to have the skill with their hands. Center forwards have a very small window of time that they have to play with the ball. They need to be able to play with both hands, and they need to be able to keep their cool while the center back is generally using, again, what we talked about now, all the technical tricks in the book, stabilize. Just a reminder, there we go. Okay. So center forwards need to be explosive, aggressive. They need to be able to take a lot of punishment from the center back. And that being said, their best psychological traits are aggression in obviously the best sense of the word, and a goal-oriented mindset. Center backs and center forwards, they generally will sort themselves out throughout the years. Sometimes they can be very good two-way players, which means they'll be very good attackers and defenders. But generally, your center backs are much more calm, able to really control a player without looking like they're being too aggressive. Whereas a center forward has a very tough life. They've got to wrestle for the first 20 seconds of an attack, and then they've got to do something explosive and get the ball in the back of the net in the last 5 seconds to 10 seconds of the game, of the attack. Okay. All right. Sorry, guys. Mixing between Zoom and Prezi really messes with the timeline. Okay, next we're going to be talking about goalkeepers. And again, there is the caveat here that starting early as a goalkeeper can help, but also understanding the game from all the other positions is just as important. So for our goalkeepers, I'm sure I've seen a couple of the parents of goalkeepers here tonight. We want to encourage them to actually play the game to get a better understanding of what's happening in front of them. There really is no reason to stick with goalkeeper up until about under 13, under 14, and then you can really start specializing. Mix your time up to understand the game, as well as getting experience in the goalkeeping position. Right, generally your goalkeepers have to be loud, strong communicators because they are the real generals of the defense. Even on offense, when that team is up the pool, they have an incredible ability to influence the game just with their voice. So if you've got a loud, strong goalkeeper, often end up captains as well, that is really, really ideal. Physically, your goalkeepers are generally long, strong players that can cover as much of the goal as possible. As you see in this picture here, that's a really tall player covering as much ground as possible, and there's still plenty space behind him. So difficult position. They have to be calm and have great reactions. Again, they have to be technically minded because goalkeeping doesn't come naturally. There are plenty tricks of the trade here that take a lot of time to actually develop. So yeah, communication, leadership, length is really helpful, but not strictly necessary in junior water polo. And they really are, sorry, I've got you at the top, most important player. Now, as a goalkeeper going forward, it often feels like you might be left out while the team are doing other drills, but really a coach that's worth his salt or her salt are really going to focus on making their goalkeepers better because they are crucial cogs in the system. So make sure that if you do have a goalkeeper, well, if you are, sorry, I'm going to be moving back and going through this rigmarole again. If your child is playing in goals, you really do want them to feel like they are the most important player. Yes, sorry guys, yeah, terribly sorry about bad signal if it's not reaching you properly. Okay, moving on to strategy. Sorry, if there are any questions about positioning or choosing a position, just give me a shout. All right, moving into strategy. This is a really important one for parents to get a handle on, not necessarily on the most technical.
Goalkeeper, most important player.
Yeah, certainly as you go forward, goalkeepers definitely become more and more important. A good goalkeeper is actually the start of a counter-attack. A goalkeeper's pass is crucial. The goalkeeper can actually make assist passes directly onto an attacker that is attacking the goal. Quickest way to score goals and the easiest and best way to score goals, straight from the goalkeeper onto the attacker and in the back of the net. If the goalkeeper is a weakness, it also becomes an issue here when we talk about strategy, because the first thing that a coach is going to do is say, what does the opposition goalkeeper look like? You know, as a player, are they effective? Are they weak in this position? Are they weak in that position? Or are we allowed to take shots from everywhere because we've always got a good shot at the goal? And especially in junior polo, that can be an issue because a lot of the players that develop really early have strong shots relative to their age group, and they literally can just pick it up and throw it at the goal as hard as they can. And without a good goalkeeper, that's going to be a big weakness for your team. So yeah, picking a strong player in goals often seems like not the best idea because they'll be lost on attack, but you can always win games 1-0 if your defense is strong. Very difficult to outscore an opposition if they're scoring more than 6 to 8 goals. So yeah, very important. Yeah, again, the starting point for a coach in developing a strategy is looking at your team and looking what you can do. What does your goalkeeper look like? What does your center back look like? what is your defensive structure going to favor best. If you've got an incredibly strong center back, or a couple strong center backs, which would be this black X over here, you would want to shield the ball from the center forward the entire way through the attack, right? That player would then move in front of the ball and stay in this position. A strong center back can really be the foundation of a good team, because at this point, what we've called tight marking means all of your defensive players are tight, holding onto their player, physically grabbing them at the elbow and holding them in position. This is your ideal, and this is what you really want, and this is what often appears to be the best case scenario for defenses. Okay, it looks like we are in the last 10 minutes, so we should be good to continue. What happens in this situation is that if this is a strong center forward, this blue 0 here, if this blue 0 gets in front of the attacking X, the ball can reach the center forward, and then there's big trouble. So the attacking player will have the advantage when the ball reaches them cleanly on the 2-meter line here at center forward, and that player will then, this player will be under pressure, getting kicked out or getting scored off. So that's tight marking, and what you'll hear from the side, I'm sure you've all heard it at this point, is your coach screaming, get tight, get tight, get tight, or tight mark. And what will happen is if this black X here is straying off their player to maybe help out the center back, or if they're not confident in their tight mark and they're not tight, the ball can move quickly to that player who then has a free shot, and the goalkeeper is moving from watching the ball here, moving right across and trying to cover that shot, and it becomes very difficult. Right, so tight marking is your general standard defense, especially when you've got good, strong center backs. Now it becomes a little bit more difficult to keep up with. This is just a screenshot from one of the playbooks that I used for one of my Sax teams back in the day. This is really looking at what happens if the center forward of the opposition is incredibly important and is a strong player. If that player can consistently hold this position in front of the center back and the ball could reach them, you're going to drop one player out of the regular tight mark defense, which is this X here, and they will then be double marking the center forward. Right, so what that then creates, obviously, is a one-man or one-player overlap on the outside, and the outside players have freedom and space with which they can pass the ball around. There are plenty defenses that use different types of structures to double mark the center forward, but that really is, we're looking at the tight mark as the one way to defend and the zone or the drop as the second way to defend. There's one or two ways to do tight marking. There's plenty ways to do zone defense, but it's actually quite comforting to know, I'm sure if you're new to the game, that there are only two ways to really defend the game when it's man on man. And that's double marking the center forward or tight marking everywhere all around. This we happen to call a vector defense, right? It allows these players to jump between the outside players. So this X will mark these two, which is essentially marking that zone. And this X will mark these two, which is marking that zone, hence the name zone defense. Again, if you have a very strong goalkeeper, you might elect to take this option because your goalkeeper can track slightly across his or her goal and make sure that they're covering the shots. And essentially, you would actually be asking the opposition to shoot into this system, right? So you're funneling those shots down the middle. Why I brought up zone defense and why I wanted to move through it is because this is often what the crowd will see as a weakness in the defense, and they won't necessarily understand that this defense could be for one of many reasons. Either the goalkeeper on the defensive team is strong, or the center forward is not able, or is a very strong player and is able to overpower the center back, and you might have this player just lurking in that zone over there. It kind of looks a bit funny at first if you're not sure what's going on. And these players might look like they're doing absolutely nothing, especially if you're used to a tight mark. So important to understand zone. All right, breaking the zone, and what you'll often see, again, we've dropped a defensive player onto the center forward here. So we're double marking this area. And then this player will eventually try and drive to either get the ball in a shooting position here, or drive all the way through and clear that extra defender, and in which case you've got a one-on-one at the back with your center forward here. So why I've brought up this slide is you'll often see players driving across the D or across the attacking formation with no purpose obvious purpose in mind. But what they're actually trying to do is get space or create space for their center forward. So that's a really big one. When you see players driving, it means that they're actively trying to open space for other players to attack. Okay. Right, sorry, trying to admit people and then send us back into this. Right, yeah, we didn't lose too much there. Okay, the last two, I'm just going to spend 2 quick minutes on extra man. Extra man is essentially when a defensive player has made an egregious foul or a major foul in the exclusion box. Okay, when they're in the exclusion box and we've got that overlap that we talked about earlier, the offensive players here being the blue zeros, right, they have a bit more space to work the ball around. This is called a 4-2 extra man, and you'll often see coaches and players saying, slow it down, let's get into this formation. Instead of rushing, let's get here so that we can work the ball around the outside and eventually look for a shooting opportunity. I'm not going to spend too much time on extra man, just as long as you are aware of how it arises in the major foul scenario, as well as what teams are trying to do when they get into formation. This is just an alternative formation of extra man. It's called a 3-3, 3 players on top, 3 players on the bottom, and you would eventually have a shot from the top there. All right, so I hope I'm not rushing too quickly through this. We've got 4 minutes left, and I just want to talk a little bit about training a water polo player. Now, there are only a few things to do, and I've put them down in order of importance, I would say. And unfortunately, for a lot of the players that are listening, the first one is swimming fitness. You do not necessarily have to be a competitive swimmer that can do the 200 butterfly in under 2 minutes, but you do need a level of fitness that will allow you to keep up with the game. Absolutely everything is easier when you are swimming fit. So when players approach me personally about how they play or how their children can get better at the game, the obvious answer and the easy answer is to get swimming fit. A couple sessions a week, 1, 2, even 3 sessions a week at a club will help you dramatically. Hard lesson for the players out there. Secondly, leg strength. Again, tons of time should be spent right from the earliest ages under 10 in competitive water polo, or at least school water polo, on developing leg strength. Wrestling into position as a center forward, center back, or outside player, being able to lift yourself out the water to pass or shoot effectively, leg strength is massive. Now, these two combined essentially become conditioning. With a strong base in swimming and a strong base in legs, you can start to work towards conditioning. Now, conditioning for water polo means conditioning yourself to handle the rigors of the game. Really important to be able to defend for 30 seconds hard and drive and wrestle your opponent, be able to sprint up the pool at nothing less than 100% and wrestle on the far side and try get a goal out of it. And if you miss, you've got to come all the way back and you've got to wrestle again at 100%. So it's a beautiful game in that you don't get much time to rest, especially if you're playing at a reasonable level. The opposition are going to keep you busy, and you want to be able to say that you are conditioned so that you can enjoy the game. Then we start to move into skills and technique, and this is where the academy really comes in. We try and teach the individual skills and technique that is maybe not so easily taught at a school level, because there just isn't enough time for coaches to go through individual playing techniques and skills at each individual position. Just a quick idea of how the academy works. We work through a long program that takes all the players through all the skills at each position. And again, that's really important to understand that your players, or you as a player, are going to play in each position and need to be comfortable at every level. Right, lastly, it comes down to strategy and cohesion. Again, the easiest thing or easiest way to get better at this part of the game is to watch the game as much as possible. Go down to Sachs, Bishops, Rondebosch, Herschel, Rustenburg, Weinberg girls, and watch as much polo as possible. Get online on FINA TV, I think it's finatv.org or something, and just consume the game as much as possible. And you'll start to see all those strategies. Okay, lastly, I'm rushing through this last bit a bit, but I think it's important to cover this, what to aim for as a water polo player and parent. The reality is, although we've got a team traveling to the Olympics next year, and brilliantly, we've got 6 Warriors ladies in that team, hopefully, most of our players are just going to be playing for fun. And I would call Western Province under 19A and South Africa under 19A fun. It's important to keep that in mind as you train. Don't push too hard. Try and get to your best level, but enjoy the game at every single level. If you're no longer enjoying it, something's gone massively wrong. And this goes for coaches at schools and provincial level. And for us as Warriors, we want to put our player enjoyment first. For the parents, you want to enjoy the game, you want to make friends along the way, and allow your child to have the best opportunity to really have fun during the game. I'm going to get cut off at some point. I just want to say thank you so much for joining us. I'll chop this up and send it out again. And hopefully we'll get time for some more in-depth technical Zooms in the future. Thank you guys so much. If there's any questions, feel free to email me at admin@warriorspolo.com.